You know, it's interesting. I was having a conversation with a client and in counseling recently, and the client said to me, Kasim, why can't people just be honest? Why can't people just tell the truth and just say what they're actually feeling, what they're actually thinking? And I was explaining to the client that because you couldn't handle it. Most of us cannot handle the truth. And I was saying to the client, look, if you want to see what level of truth that you can handle, look at how truthful you are with yourself about your own life. Because if every single one of us live within these systems, the education system, the judicial system, the family systems, and these systems are all built in such a way that all of us are protected in some way. It's a survival mechanism if we're looking at it from a Darwinian perspective. And in order for us to survive, most of us forget that the way human beings have survived has not been based on logic and based on intellect and based on who's cleverest. So those of us who survived have been the ones who can work in a group, which is why if you typically see people who are very deep thinkers, people who are very intellectual, people who are what I call a rogue monkey, they examine everything, they pull everything apart. Well, why does the Bible say this? Well, why is it that we have to do this? And you see this in children at schools, right? The child who is called the most disruptive is the child basically who doesn't want to go along with the rules. It's a child who wants to basically pull everything apart. And when they do that, they expose people within the system, because you begin to see how people treat anybody who deviates from the system, from the rules, from the herd, from the group. And as I was going to say, the person who's usually the most hated, the one who is the most outcasted, or the black sheep of the family, or the one who is isolated, is usually the one who asks the most questions. Curiosity is not something that people like. There's that phrase. What's that phrase? Curiosity killed the cat. Yeah, let me put it another way. Curiosity got people alienated from the group. That's really what that means. When that phrase was being said, and I'm obviously changing it slightly, they didn't mean literally kill. What they mean is that they segregated you from the group. And by segregating you from the group, then you become exposed. And when you become exposed, you are more likely to die and not survive, right? We know what happens in prisons and solitary confinement. Those who are in solitary confinement typically go mad, they go crazy, which is why you will see that people who have curiosity, people who ask questions, people who actually become more self-aware, those who are deep thinkers, those who tell the truth will usually be outcasted. And you'll see this because if you're living in a family system where you're beginning to ask questions like, well, dad and mum, why is it that we do this in this family? Why can't we do it another way? Well, what happened to my dad? What happened to my mum? Well, what's my mum's story? What's my dad's story? Why is it that everyone in my family gets sick? Why is it that everyone in my family has depression? Why is it that everyone in my family seems to have a divorce? Why is that? You will notice that that person will usually be called the black sheep of the family or the troublesome kid, right? Most of us forget that children are so adaptable, children are so clever that in order to survive in these family systems, kids figure out that I've got to be a certain way. Some kids figure out that I've got to be the golden child. I've got to be the invisible one. I've got to be the clever one. I've got to be the one that makes everyone laugh. So I've got to be the funny one. Some kids have learned that if you make people laugh, people stop arguing. And they've learned that in the education system. They've learned that in their family system. So what I wanted to say is that people say they want the truth, but people don't really want the truth, right? I remember I was speaking to this client and the client was saying to me, I wish people didn't have these defense mechanisms and people didn't have repression and people didn't have denial, because then the world would be a better place. And I said, no, it wouldn't. The world would be a horrible place because you would constantly be exposed all the time to the truth. And the truth is too much. It's too much to handle. Which is why, of course, evolution from a Darwinian perspective has developed these psychological defense mechanisms, repression, projection, denial. There's a reason why evolution has developed them, right? There's some things. Can you imagine if you're brought up in a family and in the family system that you're brought up, you get to the point where you realize that your parents are abusing you, right? It is not good for a child when the child is developing to recognize that their parent is abusing them, because then they're going to fight back. And guess what? If the child says something in a family system to an adult or safeguarding or whatever, they're either going to be removed from their family, or they're going to be shut down and taken back into the family, and then the abuse is going to double. And kids have learned this. Evolution has learned this, which is why you've got things like repression, where kids don't remember being abused. There are years, some kids went through such traumatic childhoods within the foster system or the family system that they've actually repressed memories. They don't remember 3, 4, 5 years. They don't remember what happened to them between 7 and 10, because it was so traumatic. And that trauma might have been a divorce. It might have been abuse. It might have been neglect. It might have been some sort of truth even, right? They've discovered that actually their mother and their father are alcoholics, and it's too much for the child. And remember that each person, each child has their own, what would I call it, their own level of tolerance. Two kids can be brought up in the same dysfunctional family or unhealthy family, and one of them end up in jail and the other one doesn't. Because kids deal with this stuff differently. There are some people who've been brought up by the same parents, and one of them, and their parents have divorced, and one of them has sworn they will never get married, and the other one has gone on to get married, and they've had a great marriage. So all of us have different tolerations when it comes to these things. But I just wanted to say that because I think it's really important that people understand that the truth isn't what most of us actually want. What most of us want is, how can I put this? We want exposure, I guess, if you will. We want exposure. We want transparency. We want the truth, but in a way in which it doesn't make us have to change who we are or make us think that we're crazy. So really, we want half-truths, right? And that's why when you are working with clients in therapy, one of the things that I have to do is I have to peel back the onion layer by layer. I can't just tell them the truth. This is why therapists are not allowed to give advice in therapy.